Hey everyone, Alawe here for the Button Smashers, and this is our review of RPG Maker FES, or maybe it's FES. Really not sure how you pronounce this one, so I guess you can go with whatever your preferred pronunciation is. Anyway, this one is due to hit the Nintendo 2DS and 3DS on June 27th, 2017, and comes to us from developer Kadokawa Games and publisher NIS America, and it will be available on the Nintendo eShop for $39.99 US. So the RPG Maker franchise has a rather long history. Now, those of you in the West are probably far more familiar with the PC releases than you are with the console releases, and this really shouldn't be surprising. The most recent console release outside of Japan was way back in 2005 on the PlayStation 2. Now, in the West, we have been treated to games like RPG Maker VX, VX Ace, and the latest version for the PC is RPG Maker MV. Also, there was a recent port of RPG Maker 2003 to Steam, so those wanting to go back and relive that gem can do so if they want to. And actually, RPG Maker 2003 is the very first RPG Maker software I ever had a chance to mess with way back when, probably back around 2003, maybe 2004. Anyway, so this is the first console version of West since 2005, and another interesting point about this one, it is the first handheld version of RPG Maker in the West ever, I believe. Now, in Japan, though, I should point out that there were portable versions of RPG Maker available for systems such as the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and the Nintendo DS. So here it's kind of a novel thing, and for many it will be a treat, but in Japan, I guess it's one of those things where they've already seen similar things. Now, when I first messed around with the software on my 3DS, I felt quite a bit at home. It's similar but also alien in some ways. Having messed with VX Ace and MV, this version does seem to borrow some things from there and will have a familiar interface to those who have played with MV and VX Ace, and it also kind of reminds me of a bit of the simplicity of RPG Maker 2003. And 2003 was actually a very powerful, versatile software, so even though it seemed a bit simplistic in some ways, it was still very easy to use, and yet you could make really advanced RPGs with it. And that's kind of what's going on here to a degree. Now, one of the things about this game is I kind of found that the UI was a little bit overly simplified. Now, in some cases, I would say a simple UI is a nice thing. In the case of this game, I felt like because the UI was overly simple at first glance, it kind of embedded some things deep within menus, and it wasn't always intuitive. Now, if you are familiar with RPG Maker and have played other RPG Maker games, usually you'll probably know enough. You can go poke around some menus and find what you're looking for, but if this is your first RPG Maker experience, you won't have that knowledge, and you'll probably find yourself having to look online to figure out where some of the menu options you'll be looking for are. One of the things I found, at least in the version I played, which is pre-release, is that there wasn't really much in the way of a tutorial. When you start the game for the very first time, you start a brand new adventure, and you are given a test map, and it kind of shows you extremely basic functions and lets you mess around with some things. But that's really the extent of it. There's not much in the way of explanations, and it's one of these things where the best way to learn is probably going to be to poke around and figure things out for yourself. Now, it's still certainly a graphical interface, so you can do things like basic events strictly through menu options and stuff. You'll learn how to connect maps together with warp events, put enemies on the map, edit the starting party, create dialogue, all these other things. But I have to look at it from the perspective that I have messed with this software before, and so even though there was no tutorial out there, I could figure out most of it after a little bit of tinkering. But I do think some people will have a problem with this, and there needs to be some sort of guide at some point in the future, although I have no doubt that there will be a guide and probably several tutorial videos out there. But still, I think it would have been nice if some sort of actual in-game tutorial was readily available. But again, upon release, it's very possible something like that will be implemented. One of the things, though, I believe holds this game back a bit is not the game itself so much as the actual hardware limitations imposed on it by the Nintendo 3DS and 2DS systems. Essentially, the Nintendo 3DS has a 320 by 240 resolution approximately on the screen that's being used. And for those that have been playing games on the 3DS, you get over it and you use it. But in the case of this game, it kind of suffers because 320 by 240 is a rather limited resolution, and everything to me looked very zoomed in. Now, most of us that play games on the PC are used to working with a 1920 by 1080 canvas, essentially, which is over 2 million pixels. And this game would fall under 100,000 pixels, so you have like a 20th to work with versus what you would have on a standard 1080p TV or monitor. So that, to some, that may sound like techno babble, but essentially it's a way for me to say that everything appears overly zoomed in. You have to scroll the screen around considerably more than you would on the PC. And the overall effect is you can't see as much of the field around you as you're designing, which isn't really good. I like to have things zoomed out so I can get an overall feel for the map I'm working on, not just a very limited section of it. So I felt like this would have been better suited on something like probably the PS Vita, or maybe even the Nintendo Switch if you wanted to make it portable. I think those would have been better platforms than the 3DS, but that's just my opinion. Now again, to go back to the UI, I did find that it was a bit overly simplistic, although it does work for what you want it to in most cases. But again, clunky menus kind of will hold you back, especially if you're not very familiar with the software. And finally, to round off some of my little criticisms here, I did notice that there were some grammatical and spelling issues in the game, in the menus. And those can hopefully be corrected at some point with, I guess, updates to the software, but initially, from what I played, needed a little bit more polish before it had gotten released. Now, on the plus side, you start with a fairly robust tool set here. The game, by default, will allow you to make a pretty traditional fantasy RPG. Everything is actually there in place for you to do it, though. You have a lot of stock graphics and tiles and character profiles and enemies and things like that to work with, and you can edit things, change colors, change stats, and come up with your own enemies, so you can make a pretty robust game with what's given to you. Now, the game, of course, will have online capabilities, and there will be additional tile packs and graphics packs and probably music packs and other things available for purchase directly through the game, and so that's something that'll be out there too. Now, one thing I do not have an answer for, simply an observation at this point, is on the PC, one of the great benefits of RPG Maker is that you can create your own custom graphics and custom music, or download other people's graphics and music and resources and import them into the game. Now, on the 3DS, the only possible way I could see to do so would be for those things to be available for purchase in the game itself, or for there to be a way for you to import it through an SD card to your 3DS and into the game itself. And I can't comment as to whether the SD card importing is possible. Right now I'm going to guess that the answer is no, but again, I don't know, and it's possible that they'll implement a way for you to do that. But again, this is not quite as robust as you would have on the PC, but again, it's probably for a bit different of an audience. Also, one of the things about the online connectivity is you'll have the ability to share your creations with other people who use the software, and they can also download it and enjoy it, and you can download theirs. So there's kind of a nice creative community that should be available not too long after it releases. Anyway, overall, I think it's a pretty solid attempt to porting a powerful PC RPG tool over to a handheld console like the 3DS. It does suffer some limitations due to the 3DS itself. I think it would have been better suited on the PlayStation Vita or the Nintendo Switch or something like that. But I understand that they wanted to put on the 3DS. A lot of people have a 3DS, so it kind of fits a nice little niche, and I'm going to be curious to see how it does and to see what types of games people come up with. We also have a more in-depth written review available at thebuttonsmashers.com, so definitely make sure you check that out. Please follow our various social media accounts and check out www.thebuttonsmashers.com to see some of our other awesome work.